Donald Trump is acting like a tariff-obsessed wannabe king right now, and he's making that clear to everyone in the country through the unhinged posts he put out this morning. But it's not just the public he's targeting. He's going directly after Republicans in Congress who refuse to do exactly what he wants, who aren't bending over backwards to save his tariffs. And because of that, he's declaring that their jobs might as well not exist. According to him, he doesn't need to worry about Congress or the courts. He's claiming illegally that he has emergency powers to do whatever he wants. And it's not because he's trying to bring back manufacturing jobs or because America needs leverage or because the country has been taken advantage of. It's because he wants to keep his corruption machine running. And that's where we need to start, with the long list of corruption involving Trump and the Trump family that has grown out of these tariffs, before we get into his attacks on Mike Johnson, the Supreme Court, and his own party in these outrageous tariff rants.
To truly understand why Donald Trump likes tariffs so much, I think you have to look at the Trump International real estate development currently underway in Vietnam. When Trump held what he called Liberation Day, as he called it, in April of last year, announcing his slew of proposed new tariffs, Vietnam was slated for some of the highest. Trump was threatening to put a 46% tariff on Vietnam. Now, at the same time, the Trump family real estate business was trying to get permission to develop a $1.5 billion new property in Vietnam. They basically wanted to build enough villas to house 35,000 residents, a 36-hole golf course, of course, theme parks, and a commercial district. Now, the approval process for something like that in Vietnam typically takes somewhere between 2 and 4 years. But somehow, last year, the Trump family managed to get the Vietnamese government to approve everything in just 3 months. Just 1 month after Trump threatened a 46% tariff on the country, Vietnam's central government short-circuited the process for the Trump family property. And legal experts described it this way to the Times, saying that to fast-track the Trump development, Vietnam ignored its own laws. Vietnamese officials have allowed the Trump project to break ground without completing at least a half dozen legally required steps, from securing all the land and financing to conducting environmental reviews. The government essentially forced the locals who lived or farmed on the land to sell, to clear the space for the Trump property. Now, in a letter obtained by the Times, Vietnamese officials explicitly stated that the project required special support from the top ranks of the Vietnamese government because it was receiving special attention from the Trump administration and President Trump personally. The Prime Minister of Vietnam himself even spoke at the groundbreaking. I mean, here he is with Eric Trump. Yeah, there he is. Now, at the time, the White House said that, quote, all of the president's trade discussions are totally unrelated to the Trump organization. Okay. And Vietnam's foreign ministry did not respond to questions about the project. But after all that, when it came time for Trump to actually implement the tariffs he threatened on his so-called Liberation Day, after the Vietnamese government had hustled and ignored their own laws to fast-track Trump's $1.5 billion project, what do you know? Trump dropped his tariff rate for Vietnam from 46% to just 20%. Gee, I wonder why. And if that example isn't clear enough for you, you could also look to Trump's tariffs on Switzerland, which I mentioned earlier. I mean, last August, Trump hit Switzerland with a 39% tariff, one of the highest tariffs in the world. Trump has since openly explained that his reasoning for that tariff was personal. He said that he made the tariff so high simply because the president of Switzerland, quote, rubbed him the wrong way. Now, in an effort to get that tariff rate cut down, Switzerland appeared to Trump personally. The Swiss sent a delegation of Swiss industry tycoons bearing gifts for Trump, a special Rolex desktop clock, there it is, and a personalized golden bar, valued at a little more than $130,000. Now, the White House says that Trump merely accepted the gifts on behalf of his presidential library, making them legal. But regardless of the legality, the charm offensive appears to have worked, because 10 days later, Trump cut Switzerland's tariffs from 39% to just 15%.
He's a mob boss. That's what Donald Trump is. And the reason is simple. He's using these tariffs to paint himself as the big, tough, strong man to, in his own words, threaten and crush other countries. Right now, Trump feels especially weak. Tariffs were the one tool he had to pretend he commanded respect on the world stage, something he desperately craves. That's why he needs a medal. That's why he needs a trophy. That's why he needs a crown. Because deep down, Trump feels his own insecurity, and he's putting it on full display. And that's exactly what we saw this morning when he went on a full-blown posting spree. He claimed he can simply rule around Congress. He claimed he can ignore the Supreme Court. We're going to break all of that down, but first, we need to walk through those 3 unhinged posts one by one.
First wrote in a lengthy post, quite frankly, the Supreme Court will be using lowercase letters for a while based on a complete lack of respect of the United States accidentally and unwittingly gave me, as President of the United States, far more powers and strength than I had prior to their ridiculous, dumb, and very internationally divisive ruling. For one thing, I can use licenses to do absolutely terrible things to foreign countries. That sounds great, especially those countries that have been ripping us off for many decades, but incomprehensibly, according to the ruling, can't charge them a license fee. But all license charges fees. Why can't the United States do so? You do a license to get a fee. The opinion doesn't explain that, but I know the answer. The court has also approved all other tariffs, of which there are many, and they can all be used in, quite frankly, a much more powerful and obnoxious way with legal certainty than the tariffs as initially used. Our incompetent Supreme Court did a great job for the wrong people, and for that, they should be ashamed of themselves. But not the great 3. Trump, continuing to tantrum, then went on to say, as President of the United States, I do not have to go back to Congress. Doesn't need to go back to Congress to, quite frankly, get approval of tariffs. It has already been gotten in many forms a long time ago. They were also just reaffirmed by the ridiculous and poorly crafted Supreme Court decision. So was it ridiculous and poorly crafted, or did it reaffirm you? Oh my God. But he continued. Trump capped it all off with, quite frankly, any country that wants to play games with the ridiculous Supreme Court decision, especially those that have ripped off the USA for years and even, quite frankly, decades, will be met with a much higher tariff and worse than that which they just recently agreed to. No one agreed to tariffs, Donald. Buyer beware. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President DJD.
So that was incoherent, rambling nonsense. I think we can all agree it was a pile of meaningless garbage that didn't make any sense at all. Is the Supreme Court's tariff ruling a national disgrace and the worst thing to ever happen in the history of the world? Or does it now magically give him unlimited power to govern around Congress and illegally tax Americans, something he claims has already been fully approved by someone, while at the same time being blocked and upheld by the Supreme Court? What exactly is Donald Trump even saying? I don't know. And that's kind of the point. He wants some vague emergency authority that lets him do whatever he wants that's supposed to be his justification. And put yourself in the shoes of Mike Johnson. Sure, you're already Trump's little hand puppet, but let's leave it at that. You don't really have power anyway, at least not publicly. He's Speaker of the House in title, but only in name. He doesn't actually exercise independent authority. So how does it feel now if you're a Republican in Congress? If you're John Thune in the Senate with Republican senators who aren't willing to do whatever it takes to prop up Trump's tariffs, he just essentially told you that you don't matter, that Congress has no power and no authority. Trump is actively declaring war on the functioning of our government because he feels weak and irrelevant. That's what this is about. He sees tariffs as the best vehicle to boost his own business interests and operate in the most corrupt way possible. That's what it all comes down to. That's what he'll miss most if his tariffs disappear. So if you're a Republican in Congress, there has never been a stronger incentive to defy him. He's trying to strip away whatever power you have left. And it's almost funny, because Republicans only seem capable of recognizing abuse of power when you project it into the future. It reminds me of that Turning Point USA event with J.D. Vance, where he was asked, among other bizarre things, about USHA's religion. He was also asked a broader question, I think about ICE, but really about Trump's abuse of power with the military and so much else. The question was basically, Mr. Vice President, I love that Donald Trump is abusing presidential powers to go after people I don't like. That was the spirit of it. But what happens if it's Gavin Newsom? What happens if it's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez? What happens if some other Democrat becomes president or controls Congress? Republicans are already talking about expanding the Supreme Court. Of course they are. They say, we'll pack it. It'll be great. They only seem to grasp that Trump is abusing power when you frame it in terms of someone else using those same powers later. So they understand the powers can be abused. If you're a Republican who worries about a President Newsom, a President Ayok, or anyone else wielding those authorities, maybe you should stand up now and hold Trump accountable. I suspect plenty of Democrats will want to reopen debates about the filibuster and presidential powers. Maybe that's coming. That's not my focus right now. What concerns me is why Republicans won't speak up. Yes, because they're spineless. We know that. But there has never been a better opportunity. It's politically advantageous and institutionally necessary for you to actually do your job. Instead, Trump is saying, we're going around Congress. We're ignoring it completely. And again, it's because he wants to preserve as much unchecked power as possible to push his agenda in the most legally questionable way he can. And that's exactly what Gavin Newsom laid out perfectly in this next clip.
The Supreme Court struck down most of President Trump's tariffs this week. He's already using different authorities to impose a 15% global tariff, vowing to forge ahead even without Congress. What do you do?
Well, what does anyone do? Are you going to move your factory from overseas and onshore it with 150-day certainty on a 15% tax or tariff? I mean, the whole thing is a farce. I talk about petulance. It was 10% 2 days ago, maybe 20% tomorrow. I mean, this is madness. He's flailing. He's a punch-drunk boxer. He's just, he's just trying to hit anything, a shadow. And he's a shadow of himself. He's lost a step or two. Under the IEEPA, we were the first state to sue. I was out there in the Central Valley talking about how this is going to impact ranchers and small businesses and farmers, the ag community, my state larger than any other state in the country. And Justice Roberts, by the way, basically our arguments were literally laid out in detail in his response. So it was always an illegal act. He needs to return that money, needs to refund that money with interest. He can do that in a nanosecond.
It's an illegal system he's running to make money off you and me. That's what's happening here. And if Donald Trump isn't funneling that $175 billion in tariff revenue straight into his own bank account, he's handing it off to corporations. So we need to talk about that too, and we will on this show. If you want to support what we're doing, as always, hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. And if you made it all the way to the end, drop a blue heart in the comments. Keep fighting, everyone. Don't let them silence you. And until next time, we'll see you soon.